They say beauty can change a life. But in the old stories, beauty is never free. It is borrowed, and it always remembers who took it. Long before the cities grew tall and the roads swallowed the forests, there was a river that watched everything. It had seen girls cry into its waters. It had seen lovers swear promises they couldn't keep. It had seen beauty rise and fall like the moon. The elders said the river was alive, not just with fish and currents, but with memory, with hunger, with spirits who listened when no one else would. Most people came to it only to fetch water. They bent, filled their buckets, and left quickly, careful not to linger, careful not to ask for more. But there was one girl who came every day, not to pray, not to wish, not even to ask. She came to wash the dirt of other people's lives from her hands. She was poor, unnoticed, forgotten, the kind of girl people spoke over, stepped around, and never truly saw. The kind whose beauty, if it existed at all, was buried beneath labor and dust. And yet, the river saw her. It watched her shoulders bend under heavy loads. It listened as she hummed to herself while scrubbing clothes that weren't hers. It felt the salt of her tears when they slipped quietly into the water, unnoticed by anyone else. The river listened, and one night, when the moon was full and the water was still, the river answered. Her name was Adesewa. In the village, names carried meaning, but hers rarely did. People called her by her chores instead. Girl, come here. Hey you, wash this. Don't stand there. She lived at the edge of the compound in a small room made of cracked mud and rusted zinc. It was not really hers. Nothing was. After her parents died, she was taken in by her aunt, a woman who believed kindness spoiled children and hardship built character. Adesewa woke before the sun every morning, before the goats stirred, before the air warmed. She swept the compound, fetched water, cooked what little food there was, and washed clothes until her fingers stayed wrinkled long after she stopped. The river was where she spent most of her days. She knelt at its edge, scrubbing fabric against stone, watching the current pull dirt away like it was swallowing pieces of her life. The water was always cold, always clear, and somehow always listening. Other girls passed by on their way to school or the market. They laughed loudly, talked about festivals, about clothes, about who might notice them. Sometimes they stopped to look at Adesewa and shake their heads. River girl, they called her, always dirty, always tired. Adesewa never answered. She kept washing. At night, when the village gathered to eat or tell stories, she stayed behind. There was always more work, always another task. When music played in the distance, she listened from her room, imagining the warmth of lantern light and dancing feet. But no one invited her. Her reflection in the river was the only one that ever stayed with her. Even then, she barely looked. Not because she was ugly, but because she had never been taught that her face mattered. And all the while, the river watched. It watched the way her shoulders slumped under responsibility that wasn't hers. It watched the way she never asked for help. It watched the quiet patience that settled in her bones like an old ache. By the time the sun set each day, Adesewa's body was exhausted, but her longing was wide awake. The news reached the village on a hot afternoon, carried by voices louder than the harmattan wind. There was going to be a festival. Not just any festival, but the moon celebration. A rare gathering held only when the moon rose full and unbroken at the height of the dry season. It was the night the river was honored, the ancestors remembered, and the young people of the land were seen. Drums were repaired, courtyards were swept clean, mothers spoke in excited whispers about marriage and opportunity. Fathers nodded thoughtfully, calculating futures they hope to secure. For the first time in months, the village buzzed with anticipation. Adesewa heard about it the same way she heard about everything else, in passing. Her aunt mentioned it while counting palm oil jars. "The girls must prepare," she said. "The river spirits will be watching." Adesewa paused, a folded cloth dripping in her hands. "Will I be going to?" she asked softly. Her aunt laughed, not kindly. "Going where? To embarrass me?" she replied. "Who will do the work while others dance?" That night, as lanterns were lit across the village and laughter filled the air, Adesewa carried water alone. She listened to girls her age practice dances, their voices rising and falling like birds at dusk. She imagined herself there, just once, clean, rested, wearing something that wasn't borrowed or torn, standing beneath the moon without feeling invisible. But wishes, she had learned, were dangerous things. So she did what she always did. She walked to the river. The moon had already begun to rise, pale and full, its reflection stretching across the water like a path. Adesewa knelt at the edge, not to wash this time, but simply to sit. She dipped her hands into the cool current and closed her eyes. "I don't want much," she whispered, unsure who she was speaking to. "Just one night." The water stilled. The air grew quiet. And for the first time since she had known the river, it answered her silence with attention. The river had never spoken to Adesewa before. It had murmured. It had moved. It had carried her tears away without question. But it had never spoken until that night. As Adesewa knelt at the river's edge, the water grew unnaturally still. The insects fell silent. Even the breeze seemed to pause, as if the world itself was holding its breath. She felt it before she heard it. A presence. Not beside her, not behind her, but all around her, wrapped in the cool air and the slow current beneath the surface. "Child," the river said. The voice was neither loud nor soft. It didn't echo, and it didn't come from one place. It flowed through her, setting deep in her chest like a second heartbeat. Adesewa gasped and pulled her hands from the water, her heart racing. "I didn't mean to disturb you," she whispered. "I was just resting." The river rippled gently, as though amused. "I have watched you," it said. "You come when others leave. You walk while others dance. You ask for nothing." Adesewa lowered her head. "There is nothing to ask for," she replied. "Some lives are just like this." The water darkened, reflecting the moon in broken pieces. "There is more to you than dust and labor," the river said. "There is beauty beneath what the world has covered." Adesewa's breath caught. "Beauty does not feed anyone," she said, "and it does not last." The river laughed softly, a sound like water slipping over smooth stones. "Everything beautiful is borrowed," it said. "The moon, the flowers, even youth." The surface of the river began to glow faintly, a silver light spreading outward until it surrounded a reflection. In the water, Adesewa saw herself, not tired, not bent, not worn. She saw a girl standing tall, radiant, seen. Her hands trembled. "For one night," the river continued, "I can lend you what the world has denied you: beauty, grace, a presence no one will ignore." Adesewa swallowed hard. "And then?" she asked. The river was silent for a moment. "Then," it said, "you must return what was borrowed." The glow faded. The current resumed, and Adesewa understood, even without knowing how, that the river never gave without taking. Adesewa returned to her small room that evening with her heart pounding. The air smelled of wet earth and moonlight. Her hands still felt damp from the river's gift, tingling in ways she could not explain. She closed her eyes and whispered the words the river had taught her. "For one night, I am seen." the room shimmered around her. Dust lifted from the floor. The old cracked walls seemed to straighten, the shadows retreating. When she opened her eyes, she could hardly recognize herself. Her skin glowed softly under the lantern light, smooth and unmarked. Her hair fell in waves, catching the light with every subtle movement. Her eyes were bright and alive, holding a depth and warmth no one had ever looked into. Even her worn dress had changed. It had become a flowing gown, delicate but strong, shimmering like the river under the moon. She twirled, careful not to step too far, afraid she might shatter the magic with sudden movement. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. She hesitated at the doorway. Outside, the village lanterns glowed warmly. She could hear the faint music of the festival, laughter spilling into the night. Girls her age were dancing, friends and families celebrating. And she knew, tonight, she could join them. Not as the girl who washed their clothes or carried their burdens, not as the girl whose name was whispered in passing, but as herself. With one last breath, Adesewa stepped onto the path, feeling her borrowed beauty flow through her like water, light, and courage all at once. She had become more than the village had ever known, radiant, undeniable, alive. But in the back of her mind, she remembered the river's warning. You must return what was borrowed. And even as she smiled at the glowing festival lights ahead, a quiet tension settled deep in her chest. For beauty given freely in magic is never without cost. The path to the festival was lined with lanterns, their flickering lights catching on Adesewa's shimmering gown. Each step she took made the fabric sway like liquid silver. Voices carried across the village square. Laughter, singing, drums beating in slow, joyful rhythm. And for the first time, those voices were not laughing at her. They were part of a music she belonged to. She entered the square cautiously, expecting whispers or scorn. Instead, heads turned, eyes widened. Children paused mid-step, staring. Young men and women alike nudged each other, pointing at the girl who had arrived from nowhere, radiant in moonlight. Adesewa felt a warmth in her chest she had never known. People bowed their heads politely, some curtsied, and a few reached out instinctively to touch the shimmer of her gown. One girl, jealous and proud, whispered to her friends, "Who is she?" she said, her voice sharp. "She wasn't at the market this morning. Where did she come from?" Adesewa kept walking, smiling politely, careful not to meet the eyes of anyone who might see past the magic. She wanted only to dance, to feel the music in her bones, and to breathe the freedom of a single night where she was truly visible. At the center of the square, the river drum, a large ceremonial drum set to summon the spirits of the water, began its beat. It was slow and deliberate, echoing through the air and into the ground. She felt it in her chest, vibrating through her entire body. Without thinking, Adesewa began to move. Her steps matched the rhythm of the drum, slowly at first, then with growing confidence. The villagers watched as if drawn into her orbit, mesmerized by her grace. The night was alive. She was alive. And in that moment, Adesewa realized something she had never known. Beauty could be power. But even as she twirled beneath the lantern light, she felt a whisper of unease in her mind. The river's quiet reminder that every gift, borrowed or earned, comes with a price. As the festival reached its height, Adesewa laughed and danced with abandon. The lanterns swung gently above the crowd, casting flickering patterns across the square. The drums beat steadily, and the villagers watched, enthralled. But as the moon climbed to its highest point, a chill crept into the night. The air around the river drums seemed heavier, as if the shadows themselves had grown long. Adesewa felt it first in her chest, tightening, a pull, almost like a hand brushing against her ribs. She paused mid-step, her gown swaying, her eyes scanning the crowd. Everything was still. The villagers continued their dances and conversations, unaware. Only she felt it. A soft voice, not spoken aloud, whispered in her mind, "The borrowed beauty is not yours. Return it before the night ends." Her heart raced. She remembered the river's warning, faint in her memory at first, now clear and insistent. The magic that had made her radiant, graceful, untouchable was temporary. Panic fluttered in her chest, but she did not stop dancing. She wanted one more moment and the glow of admiration, one more moment where she could be seen and loved. The drumbeat quickened, subtly, imperceptibly. She felt the rhythm not just in her feet, but inside her body, syncing with her heartbeat. Then she heard it. A soft splashing from the river at the edge of the festival. A ripple that shouldn't have been there. And in that ripple, she glimpsed a shadowy figure moving beneath the water, waiting. Adesewa shivered. The river was reminding her, all gifts borrowed from magic are owed in full. For a fleeting second, she wondered if she had the courage to return what she had taken. But the applause of the villagers, the wide eyes of those who watched her, the intoxicating feeling of beauty and power made her hesitate. And in hesitation, the magic began to tighten its grip. Not cruelly but firmly, a gentle warning wrapped in undeniable power. The night was still beautiful, but beauty, she realized, was never without consequence. By the time the moon began its descent, Adesewa felt a heaviness in her chest, like water pressing against her ribs. The borrowed beauty that had carried her through the festival now weighed her down. Every glance she had loved, every cheer she had received, was now a tether pulling her toward the river. She tried to ignore it, dancing faster, twirling in her gown, letting the lantern light glint off the shimmering fabric. But the whispers returned, faint and insistent. Return what was borrowed. Return what was borrowed. A reflection in the river had changed. No longer was it simply her radiant self staring back. The girl in the water's surface was older, wearier, hollow-eyed, a shadow of the beauty she had borrowed. Fear prickled at her skin. She stumbled back, brushing her hands along the riverbank, desperate to shake it off. But the river's current seemed to reach upward, curling around her ankles, tugging lightly, as if testing her resolve. A hush fell over the festival. The villagers continued their dances, oblivious to the subtle warning that coursed through the night. Only Adesewa felt the river's eyes on her, deep and unyielding. I don't want to lose it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Just one more night, please." The river stirred. The drumbeats beneath the festival slowed, then skipped, echoing in her chest like a warning bell. The water glimmered and rose, just enough to reflect the moon, showing her that the gift she clung to was never hers to keep. In that reflection, she saw herself beginning to fade, her glow dimming, the shimmer of her gown wilting. Every second she delayed, the river claimed more of her essence. Adesewa realized then that the borrowed beauty was never meant to last. It had been a gift, yes, but only with one condition. She must return it before the night ended, or the river would take more than she could bear. The festival's laughter sounded distant now. Every cheer felt like a reminder that her time was borrowed, fleeting, and that some gifts, no matter how dazzling, are not free. The first light of dawn stretched across the village, softening the lantern glow and washing the festival square in pale gold. Adesewa's gown no longer shimmered. Her radiance had dimmed. A reflection in the river was now calm and quiet, beautiful in memory, but gone in reality. The river whispered once more, a gentle murmur beneath the morning breeze. Beauty borrowed must always be returned. Those who take without care must give back more than they imagine. Adesewa knelt at the water's edge, her hands trembling. She understood finally that magic was never a reward. It was a responsibility, a fleeting gift, measured not in admiration or applause, but in respect for the forces that gave it. The villagers emerged from the festival in scattered groups, laughing, tired, remembering nothing of the warning hidden in the night. For them, it had been a perfect celebration. For Adesewa, it had been a lesson carved into her very being. She returned home, carrying her borrowed beauty only in memory, and in the quiet knowledge that some things, even the brightest, most dazzling gifts, are never truly ours to keep. And somewhere, beneath the calm surface of the river, the moonlight lingered, waiting for the next soul bold enough to ask and patient enough to pay. Some gifts are dazzling, some gifts are fleeting, and some gifts borrow more than they give. The river still waits for the next soul brave enough to ask and wise enough to remember the cost. Subscribe to Moonlight to Tales by Hen K for more African folklore reimagined for today.